Aloha, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Embodied Healing Self with your host, Jen Mons. So I'm very excited to introduce to you this week a friend and mentor of mine, Erica Ross-Krieger. She is a money mindset expert, an EFT tapping specialist, the author of the 7 Sacred Attitudes, How to Live in the Richness of the Moment. Erica has provided coaching and consulting services for individuals, groups, workplaces for the last 25 years. She is the founder of New Attitudes Corporation, where she offers coaching and online courses for entrepreneurs to break through their inner blocks around money mindset and to increase their belief in what's possible. She's a board certified coach, an EFT specialist, organizational development consultant, writer, nutritionist, authorized tapping into wealth coach, and has studies in numerology and the advanced gremlin taming method to provide her readers and clients with wisdom that fosters a sense of well-being. In addition to the 7 Sacred Attitudes, she's the author of The Wisdom of Chinese Medicine, a powerful paradigm for organization development practitioners, and a new definition of health, published in the Chicken Soup for the Body and Soul. Her latest course is called Reboot Your Money Mindset, and we'll talk about that throughout the program today. She lives in California with her husband, Steve, and her garden of lavender that soothes her soul. So welcome, Erica, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. And some of the listeners might be wondering, well, what does money have to do with our health and well-being? And actually, in fact, it has a lot to do with our individual health and well-being, and really a lot of what happens in our world. Like, decisions that we make with our money are what make things happen in the world. And the way that we choose to spend our money shows a lot about what our core values are and how we're living or not living in alignment with those values. And so you and I both have a background in nutrition and health coaching. And one thing that I learned over the past couple of years as I was exploring my relationship with money and how it was showing up in my life is that just like nutrition is an opportunity to receive nourishment, abundance is an opportunity to receive the energy of money. And so I really began to notice in my own relationship with money that what was missing for me was this space and this willingness of being able to receive in some capacity. And it showed me that there was a deeper layer of healing that was speaking to me around my relationship with money, in how it showed up in my ability to receive. So we met about a little over a year ago through a course.
Feels like years ago.
I know. Well, it feels like we have been together for some time. And I know when I said that, I was like, it feels like years ago. But yeah, we just instantly connected with each other in the way that we speak and our beliefs. And I'm so grateful for our connection, as it divinely came along in my life when I was in a space of transition in the work that I do in the world, which over the past 8 years has been health and life coaching, and was looking to make some changes in the way that I was basically running my business. And the reason that I share this is because it all came down to what my beliefs were about my own self-worth. Yeah. And so during the time that we connected, I made some shifts in the structure of my coaching practice that really opened up, shifted everything, going from an hourly rate and the way I was doing things to creating and charging for the value of transformation I was providing in people's lives. And what it did is it started to bring me more of the right people to work with. And I started to really have a deeper understanding of the energy of abundance, which we can also call money, and how when it can show up in our health, in our mindset beliefs around that. One that showed up for me was that I had to work really hard to make money, which was not good for my health. So it was creating stress and overwhelm in my life.
Right.
And I'm sure there are listeners on here that can relate to that. So I share this because there are so many deeper layers to our relationship with money and abundance that do show up in our health, our well-being, and in our outside world. And so that's why I'm so excited to share this with you today, because I know even in my own practice that this comes up with the people I'm working with as well. We all have limiting beliefs and a certain amount of resources. And this is always a conversation, is the belief that there's either not enough, or that it's not the right time, or that we're not worthy, or all of those things can show up. So to all my listeners, I'm super excited to share this with you today, because as I'm speaking it, I can feel physical sensations in my body. And I know that as I'm speaking about it, like there is an opportunity for a lot of these listeners, as well as myself, to continue this journey on healing my relationship with money. So thank you for being here, for your willingness to share this. Erica is an expert in this area. She has 25 years experience coaching entrepreneurs, business owners like myself, as well as other coaches and other people in different industries, individually, group coaching, corporate, and all different levels. So she's the perfect person to be sharing this information today. So thank you.
Yay, I'm so glad to be here. And I love what you said. Well, several of the many things you just said. One of them was that many listeners, as well as yourself, to wanting to continue the journey of healing the relationship. And why I love that is it's an ongoing process, right? Money is like always, as long as we're on this planet, money's a part of our life, and it's a relationship. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is the healing. ING is it's a verb. It's an ongoing thing. It's not heal your relationship with money and be done with it. It's get into the practice of healing it, which means there's layers and there's layers and there's more, and it's juicy and it's exciting and it's hard and it's wonderful and it's all of those things. So I really love what you said. And another thing I wanted to mention was I really see this work as being, and how it's similar with what you do. And I think one of the reasons we connected is for me, it's all about being embodied money mindset, right? It's not just money mindset out ethereal thinking. It's like, how do we embody it in our body, since money's energy, and that's what we're working on, healing those layers and embodying this, the next new layer. So I love that. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, this brings me back to my days in nutrition. I'll never forget when years and years ago, when she was still living, when the amazing, wonderful Louise Hay had a beautiful affirmation she used to say around the digestive process. Now, people listening might be saying, Erica, like, how does money relate to digestion? Well, listen to this. It was all in this one sentence from my belief that Louise Hay said. And she had an affirmation around digestion, which was this. This was the affirmation: my intake, assimilation, and elimination are in divine order, right? So my intake, and what I'm taking in, my assimilation of it, and then my elimination of it, talking about the digestive process. Well, the truth of the matter is, like you said about taking in, it's so related to the money mindset and the whole idea of this. You know, the balance of those things, I want them in divine order. My intake of money, my assimilation and using it, right? How I'm going to assimilate it. And then there's another term instead of elimination, but also where am I going to give back, or how am I going to invest it? So that the parallel to those things to me is just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found that in myself as well. I started to realize that the energy behind receiving and nourishing the body was a very similar feeling or experiences like the acceptance of abundance in my life. And by abundance, I mean this actually filters out on so many different areas of our life.
Of course, right?
Connection with our loved ones, it's health, it's in the material world too, but it filters out and shows up in so many areas of our life. And this is just one other avenue to accessing that healing part of ourself. And I love how you said the healing. That's why I called it the embodied healing self, because it is the idea that it is a constant journey. And sometimes there's also space to just be in the being of the acceptance of where we are. And then it opens up space for the next, opening in our journny. And
Yep.
You've been a part of healing my relationship with money. And I didn't even know, and I'm saying this for the listeners out there, I was in denial that I had an unhealthy relationship with money. And interestingly enough, I hid behind the belief that I already had everything I needed, which is true. And, you hear about abundance. It's like, be grateful what you have and you'll welcome in more. But there's also like, what's the energy behind the belief, right? Are you using it to hide, or do you really believe that? And if you know that there's supposed to be more of what you're doing in the world and you're not living in alignment with that, and that's showing up, through your financial well-being or your relationship with money, then there's an opportunity to lean in and discover what's there for you.
So on that note, let's do something. You can do it along with your listeners right now. Obviously, if your listeners are driving, they can't exactly do this, but then when they listen to it again, they can. So I'm going to invite you to do it too. Nobody's going to share their numbers out loud, but take a deep breath. And I want you to write down one of two numbers. You choose, it doesn't matter. Either write down the number of dollars, the dollar amount that is currently in your savings account. And by that savings account, I mean liquid cash money that you could get your hands on within the next 24 hours if need be, not in long-term investments, not anything like that. So just write that number down. That's one possible number, whatever it is. Don't be perfect about it. You're not going to share it. I just want you to write it. If that's a zero, that's fine. If it's a million, trillion, that's fine. Just write it down. Or pick another number, which is, if you have it, the dollar amount of the debt that you carry, that you feel like you're in, the dollar amount of debt. So whether it's credit card debt, we'll call it bad debt, not debt that you view as debt. Maybe you don't see your mortgage as debt. I'm not going to get into that part today, just whatever you feel is debt. So you're either going to write down your savings number or your debt number. So take a minute and write that number down. All you, Jen, and listeners and everybody tuned in. Good, just like that. It's whatever it is. And I want all of you to look at that number, and in your mind's eye, just kind of actually bring it into your body. Bring that amount, whichever one of those you wrote down, whether it's your debt, your savings, bring it into your body for a minute, feel into it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being off the charts and 0 being none, how much anxiety does that bring up just looking at that number? Whether when you look at the debt, you look at it and say, oh my God, this is like off the charts, I'm never going to get out of debt, and it's causing you major anxiety, you put down a 10. Or let's say you look at it, or you look at your savings and say, this causes me anxiety because I think it should be bigger. So the anxiety might come up because you think one of those numbers should be bigger than it is, or you think it should be smaller than it is. Doesn't matter. It's still causing cortisol to rise and anxiety. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how much anxiety? And I'm doing this because for the average person, one or the other of those numbers may generate, by looking at it, some level of anxiety. There are some people where maybe you need to write down the millions of dollars that you donate yearly and look at that number, and maybe you want it to be more, then do that. I don't care what number you write down. What I care about is you paying attention to the fact that there's a number there. And by virtue of the fact that there's a number there, that tells me, and you don't have to share it, that tells me we have healing to do. There's another layer there. There's some way that we need to reduce our cortisol levels. Now, personally, Jen, you know what my bias is here about how we're going to lower that. But let's start with the fact that this is where you're doing what you said, coming out of denial, looking it in the mirror and saying, yep, there's some healing to be done here. And that's okay. Take a deep breath. That's the first step in the healing, is acknowledging, yep, there's some healing to do here. And that's okay. Right? So the next thing I want to do is go ahead and set that aside. So I'd like to introduce you, Jen. I don't think I've done this before with you. And jump in at any time, by the way, if you have questions. And to the listeners as well. I'm going to introduce one of my very favorite tools in the whole world, introduced by a psychologist in Texas who is my mentor and one of the most loving human beings on the planet that I know. And that's a man named Rick Carson, who wrote an incredible book. I have it right here, called Taming Your Gremlin. And this
I was wondering when you were going to share that. I'm sure there were people interested.
Yeah.
What is taming the gremlin?
Yeah, and I'll talk more about it and how I'm a big proponent of this. I consider myself a gremlin tamer in practice. Rick is the only master gremlin tamer as far as I'm concerned, but I'm working on it, and I have been for 12 years. That book sits next to my bedside, and we'll talk more about it. But in his advanced book, which is a masterclass in gremlin taming, he introduces something that he calls a schemata. Now, I'd not really used that term before, but when Rick used it, I understood it. So I'm going to give your readers, your listeners, something, as well as you, to write down right now. And it's more than just an acronym. An acronym is just a bunch of letters that stand for something. This is actually a schemata in that it's a process, and it names a process and a practice. And what I'd like you to do is to write down on a piece of paper the two words I create, but put one letter on top of each other. I'm not on top of, but place it above each other. So in a vertical column, you're putting an I above the C, above the, I, then C, then R, then E, then A, then T, then E. And what I'm going to explain is what I create is, how it relates to this money mindset thing, and how this can help you heal another layer of your relationship with money. Okay?
Awesome.
So next to each letter, I'm just going to give you the word that it stands for, and then we're going to go back and talk about the whole process. So the I stands for the word intention. So everybody go ahead and write that down. And the C stands for, put the word connect or connection, doesn't matter. And the R stands for respect. And the first E stands for environment. And the A stands for authenticity. And the T stands for trust. Good, just like that. And the final E stands for energy.
All great words.
All great words. Now here's the wonderful sentence that goes with it, and then we'll talk about what this really, really means. And Rick dedicates half of the second book to it. The sentence that goes with it, I'll repeat it several times, is this: I intend to connect with respect in an environment of authenticity, trust the process, and see where the energy goes. And let me tell you a little more about this schemata. It is a bridge between you and anything or anyone else, including yourself. It is a bridge to strengthen a relationship, any relationship. It is the bridge that I'm using right now with you, Jen, and with your listeners. So I'm here intending, before I even got on this call, taking a moment and intending to connect with respect, setting up my environment, being sure that I'm authentic and my environment is, right? So all of that, putting that into place, trusting the process of me speaking my truth. I can't control what comes back, but I can trust speaking my truth. And then we see where the energy goes. Now, if I take that as a practice to deepen any relationship I have with my spouse, with my kid, with my parent, with my neighbor, with my friend, with my enemy, with my money, what can happen? I mean, isn't that amazing? I'm so excited by this, right? It just is what the juice that wakes me, gets me going in the morning, that says, yeah, this is what I really want to be helping people really understand. And I'm not saying walk around and send love notes to your money every day, although you could, but, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. So let me stop right here though for a sec. Do you have questions about this? Because your listeners probably do too.
Yeah, what I wanted to share, what I want to ask the listeners to check in, just to take a moment. This, by the way, this is just so amazing that you are taking us through this process as we are on this podcast. And what I want to ask the listeners to be present with, because what I just experienced is, as you said that sentence, I literally felt a shift in my own energy. And I'm pretty aware of the shifts in energy in my body. It shows up as a yawn or a deep breath, or just a settling into my seat a little bit more. And I just want to ask the questions for the listeners. I want to extend an invitation to just check in with how this is landing for you. Just this idea of this intention that we can be aware of, that shows up in our life, in our relationships with people or health or whatever. But do we think about the fact that that same energy is behind the relationship that we have with money? And if not, again, another invitation to kind of check in and notice, like, well, what is the sensation that's showing up? And I guess a good question maybe for you at this time, Erica, would be, so if a listener, so we've established a relationship of trust already. So for me, I was able to allow that energy shift to happen as you were speaking. And I literally felt myself relax into, okay, now I can listen about money. And then I'm just curious for the listeners, if you just have a tip that you'd be willing to give, if somebody who's listening is kind of still noticing a little bit of resistance.
Great. So let's go back to the letter T for a minute, and trust. And recall that I'm talking about you trusting you with speaking your truth. I'm not necessarily talking about you trusting another guy or another person or me on the other end. So, for example, here's how I use this schemata. You may call it an acronym, but I call it a schemata. So does Rick. Is that how intentional am I as I'm using my money, as I'm receiving my money, as I'm spending my money, as I'm sharing it with others, as I'm donating it? Am I tense and worried about, oh my God, when I spend this, then there won't be enough? Am I, or I'm going to write a huge check for a program I want to participate in? Like, can I just take a deep breath and feel into my body about my intention to connect with this little piece of money? And we're going to do an exercise in a minute where we can do that. So the tip for the listener is take this schemata, take the idea of, even take one letter at a time. Take the letter of I, of intention, and just see if you can be more intentional this week. Take 7 weeks and practice each letter, and then put it all together on the 8th week. So that what the trust is, you trusting you with speaking your truth. You cannot know what's going to come back on the other side. But there's an example also of this that I sort of goes with it for me. Oprah on Super Soul Sunday interviewed Melinda Gates the other day. And if there's anybody with lots and lots and lots of money, it's Melinda Gates. And yet she still talks about her relationship with money and her deepening her relationship with money. And Oprah asked her something about, well, you're raising children. What's it like to never say to them, oh, we can't afford this? And, how do you deal with that? And Melinda said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, like, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you have to spend it. Right? Really powerful. So just because you have that amount of money in your savings that you wrote down doesn't mean it's not enough. Just because you have that amount of money in your savings also doesn't mean that you need more. Or just because you have this dollar in your hand doesn't mean you've got to go spend it. Just because, right? So I just want to be intentional with what I'm doing. And like you said, pay attention to what goes on in your body. A lot of people who receive a lot of money and then turn around and like spend it right away. It's almost as if they're not comfortable just having it and being with that extra energy. And they almost have to like go spend it because then it's more comfortable. And then I return back to where I am more comfortable, which is not having enough. So it's paying attention to all of that and just becoming more intentional.
Yeah. And what I'm really hearing you say is like, what we're really talking about here, in to simplify all this, is just how does your relationship with money show up? It's all in the relationship. And as you're speaking, I notice myself like, oh yeah, sometimes I have that relationship and sometimes I have the other relationship. And also just noticing that the relationship changes because it's energy.
As they all do, right? Everyone does. And even keeping a journal, which would be great for everybody tuning in, just call it your money journal. You're noticing maybe you want to devote a whole page to gratitude for what's currently in your life. Maybe you want to devote another page to identifying that those thoughts and beliefs that you think you're really ready to be done with. Maybe you do have a thought from a long time ago about there's never enough. Are you ready to let go of that? Maybe you make a whole list of those, and then we can talk about another tool you and I both know. Yeah.
I'm also thinking like, okay, this could be another show. Let's just talk about the most common limiting beliefs that show up around money, but that might be
part 2 on this.
So that might be part 2. Yeah.
So if you're ready, I'd like to take this connecting with money, because that is really what I'm talking about here as the tiny first step in healing your relationship with money, is to become intentional about it. I think that's the first step listeners can take. So we're going to deepen our relationship right now with connecting a little bit. So I asked you to bring $1 to the call. So any listeners, if you're driving, you're not going to be able to do this, guys. So make sure you pull over to a safe place and pull out $1 bill, and then you can participate, or when you're listening, you can. So you got your $1 bill, Jen? Yay.
Yep.
So hold it any way you want. I don't want to confuse you by making you think you should hold it a certain way. I'm up, down, sideways. Don't fold it. Just take a peek at it. And I am going to ask you to do something about 5 times in a row. I'm going to say the same statement, so much so that you and listeners are probably going to get tired of me saying it. But that's okay. Keep breathing and keep doing what I'm going to ask you to do. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. So we're talking about intention here. So take a nice deep breath. Hold that dollar bill, and I want you to look at it in one position, however you got it, and notice something you haven't noticed before about the dollar bill itself, not necessarily about how you're feeling. On the dollar bill, like you're looking at it, physically looking at it. So taking the dollar bill, looking at it, notice something you haven't noticed before. Great. And then you're just noticing it in your own mind. Now turn the dollar bill over and notice something on that side that you haven't noticed before. Good. Now turn it 90 degrees and notice something you haven't noticed before. Turn it over again. On the other side.
Upside down?
And turn it, sure, if you want.
Okay.
And notice something you haven't noticed before. And now flip it over to the other side and notice something you haven't noticed before. Now, still holding the dollar bill, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to think about this dollar bill. And I want you to think about where you got it. Maybe you don't remember. Let the first thing come into your mind. Maybe you got it from the dry cleaners. Maybe you got it from your kid's piggy bank. Maybe you got it from a friend. Under what circumstance might you have gotten this? Great. Just like that. Now I want you to think about, let's say it was another person. It was change back. Where did that person get it? And now I want you to think about where they might have gotten it. And where might they have gotten it? This little dollar bill has traveled far and wide. Just connect with it. Think of all the people whose lives it's touched, maybe whose hands it's touched. And open your eyes, look at the dollar bill again, and notice something you haven't noticed before. One more time, flip it over to the other side and notice something you haven't noticed before. Great. And the last thing I just want to say is that the next time you take this particular dollar bill and are finding yourself in a place where you're going to be giving it to someone else, whether it's in exchange for a service, in exchange for goods, whatever it's in exchange for, notice that you're exchanging it, that it's really the energy that's being exchanged, and this becomes a symbol of that exchange, nothing more, but also nothing less. It's a symbol of the exchange of the energy. And that's it. So you want to, I don't have listeners to give me feedback.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that exercise. And I hope that the listeners did too. And for those of you that are driving, I really recommend in the show notes, I will put where this exercise starts so that you can come and do this exercise again. I noticed so many little details that I'd never noticed before and where it came from. And then, my imagination set in. I'm like, the possibilities of this $1 bill. And then, of course, my lovely spirited little ego came in to question, like, okay, so what about exchanges through what we most likely are making transactions through today, which is the computer and our phone. And So would you
Oh, lovely. And credit cards. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So, which is one of the reasons why I love pulling out the single dollar bill, because typically in a day, if we touch one of these or we use one of these, we disregard it. We don't even put intentionality into this. Maybe if it's at the $50 or $100 level, but a lot of times it just no, this little guy is just like at the basis of a lot of stuff, you know? So yeah, so here's an interesting thing. That's why the schemata of I intend to connect with respect is so important for any form of money that we are engaging with, and that is even the computer. I mean, I invite you and the listeners and myself that before we push the go button on the computer to buy this, to take a breath and think about, how is this transaction affecting me? What do I hope to get from this energy? What do I hope the person on the other end is receiving from it, because they're going to, and then push the button. And
okay,
then
so those questions,
yes,
those questions specifically, I am going to type those out.
Great.
I have a section in the show notes underneath called quotes. And I would invite the listeners and myself, I'm going to go back when I listen and write those questions down, because I know that for myself in my relationship with money, as, and, you know, again, this is all, I'm in the awareness of what it is, right?
Absolutely.
Most of the listeners, I'm guessing, are still in the awareness of, oh, I didn't even know I had a relationship with money, or I didn't, you know, what does this have to do with my well-being anyways? And it has so much to do with how we feel and how we show up and the choices we make, and, you know, how we choose to live our lives. And so because it is such an energy, and there are times when I'm not practicing mindfulness in how I'm choosing to use it, although I can practice it in how I choose to eat, which is so interesting, right? So it's showing me that these relationships that we have with our health and our food, our relationships as a parent, with the loved one, and with money, again, it's all coming back to the same thing. It's like, why do I practice mindfulness in choosing to eat for the most part, but then I don't always practice it when I think, oh, I'm just going to click a button and just buy something?
Well, I'll tell you something too, and don't be hard on you, and I don't want the listeners to be hard on them, because what's happening now more and more is, right, people are putting up offers and limiting the time the cart is open, right? I'm guilty of it. I do it as well for my programs, but that's buy now, buy it quickly. It's going, it's only going to be here one more day. Oh my God, I got to push the button quick. Well, you know what? It may be that if you take a moment and take a deep breath and be mindful that, yes, I'm pushing this button because I want to get this special. Here's what I hope to get out of this. Here's what I'm choosing to give my energy to this other person. And you know what? If in that moment that took you to become that mindful before you push the button, you lose out on the offer, then my view is it wasn't yours to do.
Yeah.
Really wasn't. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Last night, I have a perfect example. I had one, and the guy opened the card, and it was like only open till midnight, and it was like 20 minutes till, and I had just found out about it, and I thought, oh my God, you know what? Nope. Deep breath. Now I got it, and it's fine. It was a special, and I'm glad I did it, but I did take a minute and go in. Do I do it every single time? No. Is it a constant practice? Absolutely.
Yeah. So this takes me into wanting to explore the idea of what blocks show up for us around money. And I'm coming from a place of realizing and understanding and knowing that I really have this solid belief that how we choose to show up in our relationship with money is it's basically creating part of our life story. It's like I'm choosing to say that I will spend, like you can't put the value of like healthy food for me, like I don't, it's priceless, right? Like I'm going to pay for that. So we all have our different values and what we choose to use our money in. And I noticed that, I also noticed that in my own coaching practice that this comes up for people as an opportunity for me to check in with the people that I'm coaching them through on what is the block that's showing up for you. And what I'm saying is, so I'll jump on a call with somebody, and as you know, my programs are considered to be an investment in your health and well-being. So when this is presented in a conversation with somebody, it really invites the person to question, well, what is my relationship with my health and well-being? What do I put on it? And I say this because this is the question we ask ourselves no matter what we're choosing to use our money in. And there are usually something comes up and we have a belief, or not usually, but sometimes a belief will come up that will, I guess, prevent us from taking that next step. So
good.
So my question is really around, like, you talk about, I've heard you talk about the importance of clearing these blocks.
Yeah, let's go there.
Yeah, let's just go right there, because
I want to name a couple of things. First off, it's kind of a side note. Some of your listeners don't know because we're also doing this on video right now, and I know Jen saw it, the listeners didn't. I just took a sip of water. So I'm going to take another one.
Receiving.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that also, is that we, at this moment, the listeners as well, are doing energy work. And drinking water and keeping hydrated while you're doing energy work continues to move things through. So I know that, Jen, you and I are going to have to decide whether this is part one of a two-part series. I'm going to sort of think we might want to do that, because there's so much more to cover. But I do want to talk about blocks and get into a little bit of that, so kind of tempt us for the future.
Perfect.
In the way I know, the way I've studied, and the way I believe. So we're all energy systems, and in this physical, emotional, spiritual being that we are, my belief in the chakra system, which I don't want to get into explaining the whole thing here, but I'm going to make an assumption that many of your listeners know what I'm talking about, that in the way I've been trained and the way I know, that when it comes to clearing blockages, it on the money realm, and then on any realm, it actually goes in the body from the lower chakras up. So if I'm going to clear blocks, I'm going to really be starting at blocks at the first chakra all the way up through the seventh. And then when I'm manifesting, it's going to go from the top down. So it's from an idea to actuality and practice is where things manifest. Seventh chakra down to the first, right? But when I'm clearing, I'm starting from the first chakra up. And people might say, well, how do I know where my energy blocks are? That's my gift. That's one thing I can help people identify. But you can begin to identify your own blocks by asking yourself questions. A perfect example was when you wrote down that number. You could take a whole page and write, when I look at this number, I feel whatever emotionally, and then write the sentence, this means that I am, and fill that in. So this helps you create what I was taught by Margaret Lynch, who wrote Tapping into Wealth. This brings up exactly helping you create what we'll call a money map, which is a money map of what needs to be healed in what order. So when I look at this amount, I feel blank. And this means that what does that mean for you? It means that I've got more to go. It means that if it's debt, I'm not a good person. What's all that stuff? All your beliefs, take pages of it. See if you can drink water while you're doing it. Now, I'll talk about one other thing, which I don't think we're going to have time for today. But as Jen mentioned, I am an EFT practitioner, emotional freedom techniques, or tapping. And at another time, I think that we can do full rounds of tapping, which for the listener, and you're not looking at what I'm doing, I'm taking 2 fingers of any hand on either side of my body, and I'm tapping at particular points on either my head or my torso that are very specifically identified points. And they're the same as acupuncture or acupressure points in Chinese medicine. And when we lightly touch and tap these points, we actually can clear energy. EFT's been around for way more than 20 years now. It's becoming very mainstream. It's really good with a lot of things, healing and changing energy with phobias, with PTSD. But by and large, what it does is it lowers the cortisol level. It lowers that fight or flight. And there is nothing that brings up fight or flight more than people looking at issues that are tough for them, and money might be one. Whether it's, you could write down sentences that you want to believe in the positive and give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10 of how true that is for you. So for example, let's say that you want to believe money comes to me easily and effortlessly. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is you believe that off the charts, 0 is you don't believe it at all. That right there will show you a money block. If you write down another one that you want, which is money comes to me in increasing amounts every single day, how true is that for you? That'll show you a money block. It's easy for me to ask for money. That'll show you how true is that on a scale of 1 to 10. You want to see your money blocks? Just write down sentences that you want to believe and then rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to stop there to see if you have questions.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. As I'm listening and experiencing this myself, it's clear to me that there will be a part 2 on this. And maybe I think where I really want to end today is we've really covered the awareness piece, which is the first and often sometimes maybe the most challenging in some ways for the listeners, maybe to even realize that this is even showing up for them at all. Maybe this is the first time that some of these listeners, because I remember how I felt just a year and a half ago, that it was even possible to have an unhealthy, quote, unhealthy relationship to money, even if you believed you had everything you needed. Like there's still, like you said, Melinda Gates still has all the money in the world, and still there's a relationship there. So what I really want to end with today as we come to a closing is we have listeners here that maybe are now aware that they're feeling something in their body just by the words that you've said, that there maybe is an opportunity to heal a relationship that they have with money in their life. And this is what you do. So what are some ways that some of the listeners, knowing that we're going to come back to this, and I would love to talk more about tapping and using tapping to clear energy. And I think that's going to be a part 2. I'm also going to be hosting Alex Ortner on tapping as well. So that is something that the listeners are going to learn more about, because it is a method that has worked for me. It is something that I love to share with other people. So I do want to come back to that. But I think for today, what I really want to close with is for the listeners. So what next? So now they've been listening and now they know, I might have an opportunity to, look into this a little bit further. And this is what you do. What are the ways that people can find you? And I know you're offering a course, which I have also been a part of one of your offerings as well, which helped me move through some of my money mindset blocks that were showing up. And I can say that I did your course. Was that in August? I can't remember, but
that was September of last year. Yep.
Yeah. And, and just like results based, welcomed in, complete shift and transformation in my business. And also personally, I know I sent you a message on my tax refund. So, it's just so amazing how, because I was able to open up energetically in a space of receiving. Really what it comes down to in simple terms is I allowed myself to open up to receive energy that I was worthy of and I was creating blocks around. And that's
Yep.
really energetically what happened. So for
I
the
think
listeners,
I'm going to say one thing, Jen.
Yeah.
I think what actually happens in that 21-day challenge is that people expand their belief in what's possible. And that leads to all kinds of things that I can't promise, but I can tell you happen.
yes.
Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So
What are some ways that the listeners can explore more around their relationship with money? What are some ways that you could share with us?
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 things as well as talk about my own stuff. I do want to again recommend, if your listeners haven't a copy of it, is to go ahead and have them get a copy of Rick's book called Taming Your Gremlin. Like I said, this has been, I've studied with him for 12 years or more. He's my mentor. He's my coach. I go to him when I need him. This is all about taming the little mindset, and it's not such a little thing. It's a nasty little thing. That part of us that wants to sabotage. Taming Your Gremlin is an awesome book, so make sure you get a copy of that. If they want to read more about things related to this, Maria Nemeth wrote a book called The Energy of Money many years ago. It's an awesome little book to begin to get into the idea. So The Energy of Money by Maria Nemeth. I know this is backwards on the camera, but can you hear about it? And then finally, another one that's been out for a while by my dear friend Lynn Twist called The Soul of Money. So
awesome.
I'll
share those in the show notes as well with links.
Now, as far as with me, one place that people like to hang out with me is on a Facebook group I have, and that people can go to it and just literally type in entrepreneurscafe.com, and it'll show you where the Facebook group is, and then ask to be in, and I'll accept you into the group. So it's just, you get there by going to entrepreneurscafe.com. The course itself is a 21-day challenge called Reboot Your Money Mindset. And for more about that, to see my intro video, to register for it, they go to rebootyourmoneymindset.com. The next one starts May 28th, and I would be ecstatic to have any of your listeners there, and they can participate fully like you did. As you know, that's what gets results, right? Just be willing to bite the bullet and go for it.
Yeah, and it's the energy of your intention, right?
Yeah,
it's the intent. When you show up fully with the intention to receive this healing of the relationship with the money, that's where you see results. But it's not just in the doing, it's in the being and the believing. It's actually, in my experience with you, it's in the experience of the intention in that group setting with you guiding us through it. Really, I think I want to be clear in saying that intention for me was part of what allowed things to unfold for me. Because there's an energy behind it.
I think my job there is to hold the space and hold the container for people to do the work. And I actually believe that it's the holding of the space and the container and my intention of that sets it more than just a rote exercise doing it out of the book.
Yeah, I agree, because there's an energy in it, and it's a space that feels that you're being held in to have your experience with a person who is also an expert and can guide if you have questions, which is really nice. So for those of you that are interested, check out the link in the show notes. The next offering that you have is on May 28th. Okay. And then I just wanted to be clear that although your specialty is to work with the entrepreneurs and coaches, that this is for everyone.
Absolutely.
This is for anyone and everyone, because we all experience the transaction and the interaction and energy of money every single day of our lives. And so, quite honestly, if this is causing stress in a relationship, if this is causing stress in your health, if this is showing up in any way in your life, now I know that there might be a thought, well, I'm sure this course is probably going to cost money. And I will say that that comes back to the intention of, well, when you decide if you want to heal this relationship, and if you're deciding that maybe I want to join this course to learn how to heal my relationship with money, ask yourself the questions. What is the intention behind your decision? And then just, allow yourself to trust. Allow yourself to trust to be guided to building a healthier relationship. And for me, it was just knowing that I was worthy, and maybe somebody could connect on that too, knowing that you are worthy of having a healthy relationship with money, which will translate to a healthier relationship with your partner, with your loved one, with your health, and
with yourself.
With yourself. I mean, it really, you will, people who follow my show know that I believe everything is energy. We talked about the energy of medicine. We've talked about the energy of the subconscious and healing. Now we're talking about another energy in a relationship with money, which is a manifestation in our physical world and how that shows up. So for the listeners, I really hope that you've been inspired to check out one of these books or check out her website, or just explore a little more. Start journaling, like Erica said. Start something in healing that relationship, because I can tell you from my personal experience that this was an area that was opened up to me about a year ago that I honestly was in denial, had no idea needed healing. And I'm still in the space. I'm kind of a newbie. I'm beginning stages, but my ability to be open to receiving the possibility of healing that relationship has shown up physically in my experience and in my world. So I really appreciate the message that you have to share, the work that you have to do, all of the experiences that you have coached others throughout the past 25 years in so many different areas that have brought you to, I sort of feel like, money is for you, it's like the bowl that holds all these other gifts that you can do. But that is like one of your love languages, like helping people heal that relationship. And I just think you have such a beautiful way of doing it. So I really appreciate you sharing your message today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And Jen, it has been such a beautiful privilege and honor to support you in your growth and learn from you as well, and grow together and watch it all blossom. So thanks.
Well, thank you. And listeners, I invite you to check in with when we are going to continue this conversation, because I know that there will be a part 2 to this. So let us know in the reviews. Let us know what questions you have around this relationship with money, and we will make it happen again. So thank you so much, Erica. Thank you for the listeners. And to everyone, have a wonderful day. Aloha.